do come from the, as a continuation of the 17th and 18th of October workshop. This one specifically is going to cover 4 key areas: the inner city revitalisation, the community funding, aquatic centre stage 3, and strategic properties. We do have a note there around the theme of Premier Parks and Reserves is covered in operational planning, so does not require workshopping today. Councillor Patterson, if you're okay, we'll get through the proposals, and then if you do still have any additional concerns based on what you raised at the council workshop, we can address those there if that's okay with you.
That's fine with me.
Cool. Thank you very much. So just a reminder about the long-term plan journey so far. The first workshop that we had was around setting the scene, which actually gave the overview on what long-term plans are, what we need to have in them, and also the process to develop them. We then started our council priority workshops based on the 4 priorities of council, which were economy, housing, community, and then infrastructure. We then, as a council, got together and had our visioning and community outcomes session. The community outcomes are really key in determining what success will look like after the long-term plan, after that 10 years that we're allocating. Elected members then reviewed our priorities, considered what we need to do on those 4 priority areas for the next 10 years, and also what the council should focus on and work to achieve over that time frame too. So once the elected members have developed possible ideas, our staff then put those through to these proposals here. Just a reminder that those were presented to council last week, and this is the 3rd session. Feedback on those proposal workshops is actually very important. We're not doing any decision making at this moment, but it is allowing staff to know whether or not these proposals are endorsed and supported, and give guidance and direction given to staff. That's then taken to be included in the long-term plan modelling for our consultation document. So we're going to start with our first topic area of inner city revitalisation. I'd like to invite JP up. And just a reminder, elected members, when this was first raised with us at one of the workshops, it's on the table over there. It was decided that given that there was quite a bit of detail and of course a significant amount of work that has gone into this area, that actually it required some more time, and a separate workshop was discussed. We've decided to utilise this workshop and this time to be able to address the level of detail that was in that inner city revitalisation, and of course get some guidance from councillors. So we'll hand over to JP to cover this topic area.
Good afternoon, everyone. I suppose you took a decision or an indication for consideration into the LTP budgeting of finishing the master plan and looking at some placeholders of I think it was about $10 million at this stage to start looking at options. So I suppose one of the questions there is just around the timing of it, and so rather than dive into the detail of it, it was really a case of just remembering what we're sort of focusing on within the inner city area. So some of our key outcomes are around safety. Critically important for thriving inner city is that safety measures that we've put in place, and that supports one of your key priorities. Also critically important is around the economy and the focus of the inner city and in relation to those economic outcomes for the city. Tourism in inner city is critical to that too, from a food and beverage perspective, but equally for us being able to provide those shopping experiences that people expect when they're visiting, either domestically or more importantly probably internationally, and particularly if you're wanting to get flavour for a place. If you've come to our wonderful community for a number of attractions, including the cultural ones, you know, there's that opportunity to take something away as well. So that retail experience is also quite necessary. Equally, of course, arts and culture. So we put ourselves on display through our city, on our lakefront, through the names of our place, and being able to tell those stories about our city. So critically important elements that we've built into that initial strategic framework that we have in place, that really is the foundation and why we want to talk about it with you further, about confirming your support for that as we move towards a more detailed master plan for the community or for the CBD. So there is some work underway at the moment. We've mentioned in the progress reports about the retail study. So that looked at Tūtanakai and the retail spending and the types of shops that were operating along Tūtanakai Street, and also the economic information that goes with that. Now that's critical importance too for us also to look at a bit of a retail strategy and how we make sure that in enhancing Tūtanakai Street, we see as a spine or our high street, how that is supported to achieve those best outcomes. So all of that is work that will inform that master plan and give us that detail that sits behind it. So I've mentioned that key study, particularly that retail one. We've also got some work that we're looking at as part of the business analysis as well. So again, that goes to some work that was going to go into the district plan about reviewing our rules around the business space. Obviously, Plan Change 9 was focused on housing enablement, but there's still further work to be done around commercial centres or business centres, and obviously in the hierarchy, the CBD is critical to that. So we might just have to look at those rules. So that's a longer term view. The other part of it, and I've made a big deal of this over the couple of presentations I've had in front of you, which is about getting our basics right. So getting that clearly identified renewal funding for the inner city so that we can make sure we're replacing signage, fixing gardens, changing the rubbish bins, building that consistency from our renewals, which should be our bread and butter, before we start embarking on major investments or new developments. Get those bits right. Similarly, it's renewals, but it's also that levels of service around cleaning, maintenance, graffiti management, tree and gardens, levels of service as well. Critical elements that really show we care about. So clearly we care about our tulips and our flower beds, but it's actually extending that same view across to the levels of service we provide for the inner city as well. We've got major investments, so Lakefront and Eat Street are two critically significant investments. One of the pieces that we talked about prioritising for the inner city was that connector between the two, but also making sure, as Eat Street is a number of years old now, that we've been back in there to refresh it, to make sure it's looking as good as it did when it was first built. So important renewals in that space as well. And obviously then, if you project forward approximately 6 or 7 years, there's a decision there about removing the courts, moving them to a new location. So critical then change that happens on Pukawato Street in Hinemoa, where they've purchased the new property for the courthouse development. That development will require us to look at the public domain on Pukawato Street and Hinemoa Street, in and around that courthouse. Similarly, one of the huge opportunities, and I think it sits there at number 13 on the slide, in the little picture to your right, was that opportunity to say, okay, well, what do we do in the area where the courts were? So as we start seeing a new courthouse built, we'll no doubt see a change out of the courts or removal from that site, and the potential for a new development in that area. So critical point in that Tūtanakai spine for us to look at. So we need to be thinking about the next LTP that starts saying, okay, we know what's going to happen now in those two locations. You know, what response do we have from a city development or a public space? So really looking at a staged approach. Now, I just wanted to tease this out with you because it starts placing our inner city works in the placeholder of, say, $10 million worth of projects within a context of a number of other initiatives that we've got underway. And we've got some loose terms to them. So I've got them in words this way for those who like seeing words, and then I've got a couple of pictures of me showing sort of diagrams of how these bits fit together. But it's really my attempt to say, actually, we've got a number of initiatives that come together and either reinforce the investments that we're proposing to make, and give us a sort of a phasing or a timing to those. So really this look now of September now through to year 1 of the LTP and we've tagged this as being address our immediate challenges. So obviously we've got a community safety plan we adopted. from that community safety plan, we've taken some decisions to invest in additional CCTV, to look at additional staff to monitor CCTV, and the community safety hub. So some critical investments in the inner city to start changing the perception and that sense of safety within our CBD. Perception and real safety within our CBD. I've changed my perception statement. I've talked about the necessity then of saying, look, going into this LTP, we need to quantify and identify our renewals and understand our levels of service. Now that gives us an immediate opportunity to start investing in some areas of the city that need a lift. So whether that's replacing rubbish bins, changing out our signage, bringing in some of the stuff from the wayfinding strategy immediately. So we get some opportunity to use existing renewal budgets to start having an immediate impact. So that's really starting to address those basics for us. Levels of service also goes to that sense of safety in the CBD. When it's cared for, you feel safer. When we've removed trolleys, people will feel safer. And we address graffiti and things immediately as well. So really important basics to get right for us. So that was that sort of stage one view. We loosely termed the second phase growing pride and proof. So we get a master plan. We can start talking about a master plan with our stakeholders and getting people to buy into, hey, this is the vision for the future of the city. We're starting to prove it by investing and looking after what we've got and working on those levels of service. But also we can start looking at things like the markets, reviewing those, reviewing our activations, making sure we get more activity, positive activity, not just movements within the CBD, and events. So stimulate some improved appearance and improved safety and improved activity. And then really it was a case of saying, now is that not the right time to say, hey, we've got the confidence back in our community, now's the time to start really focusing on those new projects we've talked about. So that 10 million sort of almost coming in the mid-phase once we've sort of established those first immediate challenges and got that growing pride and proof points in place. So that's really about a phasing discussion. Now, what years that might take, we've loosely just grabbed some years there to say, hey, we're really talking about the mid-phase of this LTP. So again, I love diagrams, so there it is summarised a little more simply. And I've probably built in another piece there too, which is now just to tie it back to another couple of critical projects we've got underway. Emergency housing, that's done a lot of damage to us and the reputation work. So obviously there's been a view and we're on a trajectory to see the exit of emergency housing, and our local MPs talked about a 2-year horizon to see them all gone, which would be fantastic. And those safety improvements, so get that proof point that people feel more safe, and we've actually shown that the city's safety can be improved. I've talked about renewals and levels of service quality across the inner city, really critical, but equally we've also had that piece of work we've commissioned through Rotorua NZ, and you had the consultants come and talk to you last week or the week before, I think it was, about rebuilding our reputation. So you actually need the proofs of action to actually start making sure that as we start rebuilding that reputation and getting those campaigns in place, that there's some truth points to it, and that's really critical. So that was that immediate challenges part. So when we successfully start that, we start getting that pride uplift, because part of that campaign has also got to talk to our locals about their views and their expectations around the city as well. So I've talked previously also about saying in line with that renewals and that focus in the city is also to start looking at an inner city operations team so that we've got the responsiveness on the ground to work with our local retail community and that community of the inner city. So not only have we got the renewals available and the levels of service there, we actually have people who can engage with that and talk to the owners and respond more effectively. That also links to, as I've talked about, a focus on making sure we get the most out of our markets, activations and events when they link into the inner city, but equally starting to say, okay, that's the time to start introducing some of the projects that have come out of that master plan that have been bought into. With a view then that probably we go more confidently into people are prepared to invest, so we can start aligning that private investment to the public investment we start making across a phase 3. So that's that kind of layered interventions. So really for me it was a case of starting to say, look, we want to talk about inner city as a priority. but it's when you get to it and how you build the picture to make sure what we invest in the inner city is as successful as possible. So that's kind of our thinking around how we can sort of build towards successful investment. That's a lot more detailed version, and I just again highlighted there was us sort of really drilling into sort of a more of a Gantt chart action plan of that, more specifically about how we see these sort of things layering into the LTP, and really that's giving a bit of a guide to my team to start talking to Thomas about introducing some of the CapEx potential projects into the program. So from your guidance the other week, it's more a case for us of seeing, look, the $10 million by the time we get to that investment of new individual projects is now starting to look like the back end of year 3 out into the next LTP as well. So that's kind of the phasing discussion. But for us, I think we really need to get those proof points in place, get a master plan that's well supported, and get our basics right for the inner city. So that's kind of where our thinking has got to. So happy to answer off any questions if that helps.
Thank you, JP. Any questions? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, JP. I see the lakefront and Eat Street and other stuff to be determined from a master plan. You're not looking at any of that till 2026. So that's 3 years from now. Okay.
Again, Councillor, it's more a case of just giving you a guide. We've got to get some other basics in place. So the master plan, if we take a view of we need to come back to you with that strategic framework, confirm your desire to take that forward as a master plan, that gives us a chance to go out to that community. So we're into next year then to confirm with the Chamber of Commerce and our other stakeholders about a master plan. So now we're really into saying, actually, now we need to start planning the projects that follow. So I think our view, when we line it up with things like the wayfinding strategy that's being developed, the cultural foundation work that we're getting, that'll give us the master plan, but in the meantime, in an intervening 2 or 3 years, we can actually go back through and confirm, look, we want to refresh our current infrastructure that sits in the city. What's that going to look like? How do we stay close to that strategy at that point? So there will be investment. To me, this is the question around the new CapEx as opposed to renewals of the street signage. It gives us the chance to work through a whole bunch of other elements of it. So it's not quite as dramatic as nothing until 2026. It's actually a whole bunch of minor stuff across the whole city before we get into specific new projects on particular locations.
Just another question on the emergency motel exiting. My understanding that was next Christmas, not this one coming, but the one after.
Yeah, look, what I picked up on there is I've just repeated into that slide the messaging from our local MP who said, there's a sort of a 2-year plan to exit emergency housing. You're correct, the contracted, consented motels are through till December 2024. At the current trajectory, we will see most of the EH gone by Christmas of next year. I just wondered whether there is a bit of a tail that will extend into the following year.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I do think getting the basics right is also very important. So ensuring level of service and that the place is looking tidy is also very important. We certainly had some feedback from the community. Any further questions? Sorry, Councillor Maxwell.
Can you turn the slide back a couple to the layered intervention? Yeah, that one. JP, is there anything that we can do about that golden glow hotel thing there with a skeleton left up there after a fire? Do we have to do it, or can we get the motel people to do it? Because it's just an advertisement for people coming going, whoa, look like the Wild West or something. But it's just, reputation, try and make it a bit better.
Your Worship, it's a bit off topic, but I'm happy to answer off the question if you think it's okay. We've received a resource consent application from the owner of that property who wants to obviously rebuild the front building. So they're currently in our RFI process, request for further information, so their consent is with us. There's no necessity. They've made it safe, so they've put fencing around it, and they don't have to demolish it at this stage because it's not dangerous. However, I 100% agree with you. We've got the ugliest fences we can around it, and it looks absolutely terrible for the city. There's no particular way we can put that pressure on that owner to clear and remove it from a regulatory perspective. From a social perspective, I think no doubt someone might pick it up from this exchange in the newspaper, but I think the only other option would be for us to write to the owner and just ask them if they can bring forward the demolition. It would be fantastic because it's a terrible look.
Thank you. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā anō koe he te manukura. Tēnā koe, JP. Thank you for your presentation. I must say I'm a lot clearer now than I was in our previous workshop with regards to this kaupapa. I think I'm glad the renewals have been clearly defined and these new projects are moving forward. My question is that, given that this is for the 2024-2034 10-year long-term plan, we start doing the master planning, all the work to then hopefully springboard us into the future planning. I understand that it's every first 3 years of any long-term plan that's been a review. Is that correct?
Yes, you review the plan every 3 years. So this is the 24 to 34 LTP, and the next one will be the 2027 to 2037 LTP. So you're right, the critical piece is you need to know what you're going to do in your first 3 years quite clearly. We don't know clearly what we're going to do in our first 3 years. We know we're going to get a master plan complete, and I think that's why we're more a case of saying, look, there's some placeholders for some major projects in year 4+. Now, if we complete stuff earlier, we can always bring it into an annual plan for discussion. But I think what we've talked about here is actually getting some of our basics right and look at our renewals and our levels of service as we start preparing the plans for those subsequent investments. So I think when we get to 2027, and we may have some numbers that have been put in those out years, the expectation would be, and I think it's not an unfair expectation, that we've finished our master plan, we've done our due diligence, and we know specifically what we're going to do, and we'd have more accurate numbers for the actual investments we need to make in that next tranche.
Thank you, JP. And that's sort of what brings me to my next question was, so I suppose what's the scope in terms of, or not, I don't know if scope's the right word, but 2027 you mentioned, we do all the planning. Who knows what happens in 2027 politically? Is that on that council at the time? Are they obliged to take those plans forward?
No, just like you're a new council doing a new LTP yourselves. I think the key for us is to make sure that if we've developed a master plan and a strategy for the inner city revitalisation, whatever new council comes in has a sense of ownership because it has been widely consulted and it's well owned by our community. I think one of the things that we've suffered in some of our strategies is that they've got to a point, and we've cherry picked out, that was part of the DCA report that we reviewed the last 20 years worth of strategies. We've done regular strategies which have been remarkably consistent in their objectives and their priorities, but each one has had a bit of a cherry pick out of it before we move on to the next one. Now, sometimes that's led to some inconsistency, so we probably need to make sure we've got a well-founded, well-developed, well-consulted strategy that actually will stand the test of time and is actually built on a systematic approach to the delivery of those actions. And I think that's another reason why the focus on trying to get our renewals and our levels of service right first is probably a good step.
Okay, I might have a bit more to add to that, but I'll wait for comments. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, JP, for that clarification. We had the previous workshop where we gave some direction setting, which was around finishing off that master planning, but also then putting into the proposals for consideration for modelling $10 million worth of funding. And how I'm reading this is that we basically need to get everything right before we actually spend the $10 million. So are we effectively, or are you effectively suggesting that we would be better to take out the 10 million in the first 3 years, finish off the immediate master planning, and then once we kind of have a better idea of the level of investment and what we need, then that goes out to, later years, and do we then ring fence a sum of money at that point for potential CBD revitalisation investment, depending on whatever the projects are that come from the pieces of work that we do?
Councillor, yes. That at the moment we really are talking about placeholders, because we've got some ideas of projects, but really we haven't developed them up in a context of making sure we've got a clear view of the strategy. So they would be placeholders. The opportunity then is if a project's ready, your decision could be to bring it forward and add it into an annual plan discussion, or wait till the next LTP when you firm up the actual numbers to be in the next tranche of next 3 years. But in the meantime, I think the key for us is to go into your wider consideration, just some placeholders at this stage, just to show an intent to get to the CBD in a sort of a systematic approach.
Yes, I suppose it's a question for your worship then, given that we've currently got a direction to staff to be working up proposals with 10 million in years 1, 2 and 3. Excuse me.
I think, are you wanting to know, in the last workshop we indicated $10 million, but whether now that we've got more detail, whether this is direction given from the councillors to allocate that 10 million within the next 3 years or after, as JP
Yes,
said.
I was just wondering what the process would be if we were to just revisit that decision or direction setting indication.
Thank you. Because we now have the further detail that was asked for, I guess it would be appropriate for councillors to confirm whether what's being proposed is what they're happy with, which will mean that 10 million is, as JP has said, will fall into later years once we understand what we are actually going to do. And I think just my comment to add to that is also, although there has been a significant amount of consultation undertaken with our business community on this, I would also like the opportunity for this new council to, when those plans do start to become formed, to actually, again, double check with the business community within the inner city if they also support it, which I'm sure we'll be able to do as part of that process. Any further comments, JP? Or yep. Cool. We have Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Wadu.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, JP.
Councillor O'Brien. Are we still in question time?
Yeah, although we are in a workshop.
We're not really
so
bound by that.
It is more informal.
Kia ora.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I will come, because we're in a workshop, we don't have the standing orders, so you are welcome to ask more than one question and have comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, JP. JP, could I just ask, moving forward, and I support what you've got here, by the way, could I ask, as we move forward and hopefully we show progress in the CBD revitalisation, if we start to attract, as we've heard so many times, apartment living, urban development, how are we going to, how would you suggest we protect against, if I can put this nicely, the Aucklandification? There were a lot of the late 80s, the shoeboxes, colourless shoeboxes stuck up all over the show. If we're going to be spending all this money, how can we somewhat protect that investment by saying in our design frameworks moving forward, so we're not replacing old ugly buildings with new ugly buildings?
It's a challenge, Councillor, and it's a good question. There is always the double-edged sword within our district plan rules of seeking to be enabling until you want to be disabling. And that is the perennial problem where people say, look, I don't want to have to go through the rigmarole of my consenting process, or you've got too many rules and too many expectations on us. You keep sending us back around for urban design features, or for consent of neighbours, or for other enhancements that potentially start impacting on the financial feasibility. So that's often the message we get around rules. where the alternative is then you do the fewer rules and bring in sort of things like design guides, making sure that we've got as much proactive outside of a statutory or a rules framework to support some good design or good outcomes. That means there's no guarantees though. So it does create a challenge of the outcomes you're seeking to achieve. So look, I don't think there's any good outcomes in that space. One way you're wrong and the other way you're wrong. And so that there is a case there of saying, look, the market also follows its nose and knows when a good development's a good development, they'll get their price premium versus something that is not. That becomes sort of that pivotal problem. It's the perennial problem, Councillor, and design guides is our approach, as well as freeing up options for people to be enabled to make good investment decisions. And investment decisions are significant, so you kind of hope there's that support for it. We've got in place a development support unit that, again, has some urban design capability to help, but it is not a guarantee as we change rules or make things more enabling.
I suppose I just have a concern that whenever we see the developments, we see these lovely, nice paintings and drawings of all these beautiful avenues, and sometimes the reality doesn't quite match the. And if we're going to be building in a lot of money in the long term, I just have a concern, but I'm sure other councillors moving forward will have that. And just my second question, could I just ask you, in terms of. Actually, I'll leave it there. Thank you. You've actually sort of covered it as well, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Waru.
Kia ora te manukura, thank you for your indulgence. JP, just around timelines, and given that, you know, at the 3-year mark, we go, okay, completed, could be a total new political scene at the time, then it's, no, we're not going to do that. Is there a way we can put timelines, more specific timelines on when the master plan will be done and when projects from that master plan can be started? So therefore, it actually there's mahi going to get done, which brings me to my whakaaro around I'd be reluctant to put up, you know, what we went through last week around making a decision to put a bit of an investment into our inner city, you know, putting our money where our mouth is, and actually just getting some projects started. I don't know how doable that is. Can you give us an indication?
Councillor, I suppose the first one is you as a council set your priorities, and you've said inner city was a priority. So that's really important, and the second part of it is that you translated that into some KPIs for the Chief Executive, which was to actually complete that master plan by Christmas. So at this stage, I'm not going to achieve that because obviously the Chief Executives then hand down their KPIs to us as the direct report. So the key pieces I had seen there was that we actually needed to introduce you as a new council to that strategic framework and how we'd got to where we got to before we could go, now we're going to start building on that towards a master plan. And the other piece was to report back to you on that retail study that we've undertaken and those perception works that we've done there. So that piece of work is coming together, but it's not meeting that timetable. So your direction as a collective is important for when we get this stuff done, and no doubt you'll have a new Chief Executive to have that conversation with, who will then no doubt hand it to me. So that's really important, I think, for you to give some certainty around those timetables, but I think also that gives us the chance then to have a situation where we can have that more detailed conversation of, do you want to do a project earlier than what's proposed in the LTP? It becomes an annual plan decision. Obviously, you've got to make a whole bunch of really hard decisions now about how you populate a 10-year program. And initially at this stage, I think I've given you a roadmap that shows here's how we can layer the interventions to actually recognise that we've got to get some of our basics right, rebuild our reputation, start seeing a change in the safety picture and get that stuff right so we're ready to really make some of those investments. Yes, there might be some earlier projects that we identify in the plan, but I'd hate to say that yes, we have, because we haven't done the plan yet.
Thank you, JP. So just in saying what you've just said, just want to be specific again around the renewals. That's not our conversation. The conversation you and I are having right now is not about the renewals program. It's about the master plan is different to that, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We should be taking, like when we should be looking into the master plan to start talking about things like the wayfinding strategy we're working on. We should understand enough about our cultural narrative and our pictures to start saying, actually, we can lean into our renewals confidently that we can put in place a view that signage should look like this within our city, or rubbish bins should look like this, or the levels of service around maintenance, graffiti removal, lighting should look like this, and we can start building that consistency into it. I think if you walk through our CBD, as you all do, you will see that we have over many decades changed and varied and not used our renewals to build the consistency of the look and the feel and the quality of the experience. So really basic stuff in there.
Thank you, JP.
Thank you. Were there any further questions or comments? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you again for your indulgence. Just seeing the lovely Councillor Kiriopa's face pop up on the screen reminded me of a very good point she made regarding Ohene Mutu. We're talking about the wayfinding project, etc. Her concerns were raised around the gateway to Ohene Mutu that was supposed to be put in place. I mean, that is one of our major visitor attractions, and yet, you know, I hate to say it, it doesn't look like that. It looks like it's just been left there to its own devices. If there is a plan, which according to Councillor Kiriopa there is, how hard would that be to build into our renewals, because that area is part of Rotorua and does need attention. If it's already there, can't we progress that so that it is connected to the CBD?
Yeah, the renewals should be invested into the areas that need to have that investment. I don't know if that's quite as transformative as the master plan was that came out of that. And I think it probably is just worth having a bit of a conversation about where that master plan came from. And so originally when the Lakefront Working Party was developing up the concepts, some of those issues around that interface with Ohene Mutu were discussed, and Councillor Kiriopa was correct in saying there was a view that it would introduce thousands more people to almost the edge of Ohene Mutu, which it would increase that volume. So there was that decision to undertake that piece of work, but equally there was a contra view, which was the village didn't want that. And so actually the finished design that was reported back into the design team was actually to de-emphasise that area of the lakefront, to prevent that sort of focus coming into the village. And as a consequence, the sports clubs, you know, the water sports club there was maintained. They looked at Wakarama, they looked at larger lawns area to sort of resist sort of people seeing that as a vehicle to go into the village. So I just want to be clear that actually the design was actually to turn off some of that tap of people who may have found their way into the village. So that's not to say people still don't, and they still don't see it as a critical attraction, but I just want to make sure that it's clear that the design actually de-emphasised that entry into the village. But we still have that master plan that was done, and there's still an opportunity, I think, to really enhance that, but I don't believe the renewals would go far enough in that space.
So that being the case, is there any opportunity for us to consider that as an investment?
I think that's part of that wider discussion for you as a council, yes. So if you'd like to include it within the master plan discussion, that would be a decision of yours.
And so just to get real clarity on that, and Councillor Kiriopa, I do see your hand. Oh, sorry, was that a clap? I think it's a clap. Oh, hand, yep, we'll come to you shortly. Just to get clarification, so you're seeking direction. I think there's general support for what you've proposed, but then at what stage do councillors get the opportunity to identify specific projects that they wish to prioritise as part of that master plan.
And I think that's the key. We need to come back. We need to go away and do that work with you and then with our community around setting up a master plan. We can certainly bring the Ohene plan into that process so you get a feel for that, because you, at the moment you're probably making decisions off the knowledge that there is a plan. How that's staged and phased within the wider discussion needs to be brought into those workshops that we might need to have, and then we're back into probably a wider community engagement. I would have certainly thought there'll be a mix of views from the village about which way they would like to go as well, as there always is. So that would be a really important part of the process if you choose to do that. So at this point, I'd hate to say we would have any clear view of what the project should be. We've got a lot of ideas. Part of that work that we would do through that workshop around the key objectives would be to identify some options. There's been a lot of work done in the past, so again, reintroducing some of the ideas that have come out in the past, which are entirely logical, are there, and so there is a really good opportunity for us, I think, to have a fresh look and you to get an understanding of what you might want to do and achieve across either a short, medium, or longer term view, and as big a catchment as you'd like.
Does that cover it? Thank you. We've got Councillor Kiriopa and then Councillor Maxwell.
Oh, just.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I just need to clarify. I feel like what's been said about the Ohanamatu plan is a misrepresentation. I need to clarify that, yes, the plan within Ohanamatu, it did include signage to ensure that tourists are directed to tourist attractions within the village rather than what's currently happening, because there's no signage at all. Tourists walking into people's backyards thinking that there's something to see there. So to say that that the plan was to dissuade tourism within Ohanamatu is inaccurate and untrue. What the plan is to focus tourists into the areas where there's something to see and keeping them out of people's backyards, and to also insinuate that there's differences of opinion within the village as to whether they want tourism or not. I don't know where that's coming from. We were very clear, and yeah, insinuations like that are unhelpful. We're very clear about what we want in the village. We just want controlled tourism within the village for the health and safety of visitors and residents alike. And thank you, I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Patterson for raising and supporting the need for Ohanamatu to be included within any inner city revitalisation plan.
Thank you, Councillor Kiriopa. As a councillor, I also attended some of the hui that were held down at Ohanamatu. I think there are a number of them, perhaps 3. I do recall at the time that there were some comments from those residents there that some did not want tourism, some wanted it better guided. So, but again, we appreciate your feedback, and thank you, Councillor Patterson, for raising that.
Sorry, could I just clarify that what they were talking about when they said they didn't want tourism, they didn't want Ohanamatu charging for visitors to come into the village. That's the only thing that people were disagreeing on, whether we should charge like whatever would do or not. It's not about whether we're willing to welcome people to continue to come into the village to visit St. Faith's, Tamatukapua, and the areas within the village with geothermal attractions. So we just need to be very clear, because we don't want to make it sound like we don't know what we need and want within the village. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's certainly not what was being implied by staff or us. But again, I'm looking forward to the master planning process being underway, which gives us the opportunity to clarify and be very clear with everyone on what direction and what specific projects and what areas we wish to support. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. And look, adding further to the kōrero, and both Lani and I live in the village, and it is good when we see controlled tourism that comes through there. But can I add something? The real people to talk to there is a village committee under Guy Kingy's leadership, and Donna's on that, good people that are on there. I think another good kōrero with them to get the positive feeling of how most of us do feel down there. And I also want to add that right from the beginning, previous terms of council, there was the odd one or two councillors, I won't name them, that didn't want anything spent other than on the lakefront and not in Ohinamatu. But at the time, a lot of us did want to see something positive happen, but I get the feeling there might be a better response this time. Thank you.
Thank you. There appears to be no further comments, so I'll just, sorry, we'll go to you very shortly, Councillor O'Brien, but just for councillors, we do have the proposal in front of us, so what we need to consider is, of course, in the initial workshop, there's an indication of the $10 million coming into this next 3 years. The proposal with further information we've just been given has identified that that $10 million won't be required until later. So the direction we'll be seeking at this point is that staff won't consider allocating that $10 million until later on in the long-term plan process towards the end of, as I see on the board, is it year 3, 2026 to 2027, which just, just identifies when we expect that cost and the correlating rates increase to come into. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for your kind indulgence. JB, could I just ask very quickly, given this is the long-term plan, any thoughts, or will the Hinimoa car park be included in the master plan? Because obviously parking in the CBD is going to be very important. If the growth that we hope for down the track happens, would that be something that would be included down in the LTP in the future, about what its future is? Thank you. Or future investment costs? Thank you.
Yes. I think it's one of our land holdings and one of our few land holdings, so therefore it's a potential catalyst for some opportunities. So I think in thinking about that site, so sorry, long answer, so yes is the answer, we would have to think about what that means for the parking implications, because that's critical also to the vibrancy and the activity within the CBD. So it's a case of understanding that total picture before we make a strategic land decision, but yes.
So sorry, that would possibly be in the master plan or further down the track?
In the master plan.
Thank you. Were there any further questions or comments on this before I seek your direction? Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, he te manukura tēnā tātou. The reason I was asking the questions the way I was asking was just to see if we could actually, and JP answered it, around putting a timeline on the master plan. This is sort of quite vague there. Now, if we put the timeline, if we agree on a timeline for the master plan, then we will need some investment to get some projects underway, like Ohinamatu and others. So hence my reason for the pushing the investment into our city, because then at least we could get something started. My fear is that if we get to the point where 3 years and then we've got a master plan, and then who knows what the scene is at that time, then it starts all again, and then our community, or the community, sit around and wait again for something to happen. So that's what I want us to think about when we do go forward on a plan here. I agree with all the things in here. Nothing wrong with that. Renewals, ka pai, everything. But I just think it's just another delay, and I really do think we could get some good master planning done in give it a proper timeline. But I don't think 3 years I don't think it's going to take 3 years. So kia ora, that's all I'll say.
I just wonder, JP, if you do, understanding that and if also, as you mentioned in your layered interventions, dealing with the immediate challenges of those first 3, the emergency housing motel exits, a safety strategy and the community hub, and any resourcing change in the reputational rebuild plan, and funding to Rotorua NZ. I appreciate that those are 3 quite large pieces of work that this council has identified as immediate priorities. Would there be any scope to start the master plan building, as Councillor Waru has raised any earlier?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, my apology, I didn't mean to send a message saying that we had a Christmas deadline or December deadline for a master plan and then suddenly that turns into a 3-year process for me. My view would be that we've probably got another 6 or 8 months worth of work to complete a master plan. So it would be done sort of 6 or 8 months from now. I can certainly bring back as a progress reporter a more of a Gantt chart with Julie May, who would be leading that piece of work, detailing what those steps would be. So where we finish off our baseline reporting, spend some time with you workshopping some of the stuff that's gone before, and then start looking at that consultation and engagement more widely. Bringing it into line with the wayfinding strategy work that's been funded through the STAT funding and another pieces of work as well. So the key here is the strategy is not something that would be disappearing into a black hole for 3 years. It would be something that we can bring together, particularly if we've also engaged it with our Hini Mutu work. That gives us direction for that investment into those renewals that we've talked about, and to layer on top of the work that we're already doing around our challenges to address. So that should give us a steer, and that's why I made the comment there. That gives us the opportunity to, if we have got some clear projects and you want to move on them earlier, you could bring them forward into an annual plan discussion. So that was kind of the intention. So really, my view would be you would be well and truly finished a good master plan by the mid to late next year. That should give us a really compelling direction. That does enable us to say, okay, well, let's make sure we're getting our renewals aligned, our wayfinding discussions aligned, and it does give us the choice of making some earlier projects if required, or if financial drivers hold us back still, we keep working on that until we've rebuilt that confidence and that proof point before we do any further investment. So it does give you the choice, but at this point we're talking about putting the placeholders in that 4 to 7.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just need to attend to a private matter outside of the chamber, so I hope to be back in about half an hour or so. Sounds good, JP. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. So councillors happy with the direction that's been given? Can I get a general signal of support around the table? Yes? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, JP. So that will now be put forward as our proposal moving forward.
Yeah. The next topic I had was just on community funding. So, councillors, I suppose one of the issues with this is for many of you are unfamiliar with the framework and what we actually put out as community funding. So probably the key piece here is just to talk about how it connects with some of the other issues for us. So community funding is really important and has been in the past, and you received a number of submissions during the annual plan process from partnership funded organisations, but also some other grant funded organisations who see it as being a valuable contribution into our community. So where do we think community grants fits? Well, prudent financial management. We have a good process around distributing grants. We take a look at how they multiply impacts out there in the community, so they're really a catalyst for further investment. And obviously we want to make sure that when people see those, that they're transparent, it's obvious as to why people have received grants and the value it's created. A couple of those community priorities there. Safe and proud communities. We already introduced the safety priority into some of the community grants that were dispersed this year. So it became a priority we introduced immediately into that consideration. And obviously that gives us a chance also to look at the partnership agreements and arrangements we have. We've talked a bit about Māori wardens and their opportunity to work with us around the community safety hub, but also the bus routes, and so they're a really effective community group for supporting safety initiatives. Your priorities also have a more general one about enhancing wellbeing, which does give us quite a large amount of scope to introduce a whole bunch of considerations into grant allocations. urban, rural, Māori, non-Māori, the multiplying effect, active. So all of those things go to that theme around wellbeing, so really critical. But equally, we've got some advantages there of pointing to some of those priorities around things like infrastructure, safe, proud communities, that connectiveness and cohesiveness, and also protecting and restoring our natural environment, which often goes to some of our smaller grants that we've dispersed over the previous years. Again, look, that's just repeating back, I think, some of the outcomes that you have identified yourself through those workshops. So really important that we keep a lens on those when we start thinking about refreshing or changing our community grants policy. So I don't think I need to repeat back to those that you've worked on over previous meetings. So just a picture of our current grants arrangements. So we have our partnership agreements, so about 210,000 per annum. Now those are allocated each 3 years. So the application process is, once you agree the amount, tends to follow very closely behind the LTP sign-off. So we go out, get applications at that time, and then whatever the final decision is on the size of that fund, some decisions are made around those partnership agreements. The important thing about the partnership agreements are they're for 3 years. So we give an allocation to some of these groups, which gives them a solid base. It's not tied to any projects. It's more about administration and supporting the health of those organisations that contribute significantly to the priorities of our community. So I've got a slide which details some of the different grants. Community grants, smaller size, one-off individual projects, a lot leaner process for people to make applications, and often we're the go-to for those kind of grants. And then finally, the one that it probably goes to a couple of the discussions I've heard in your workshops, the Neighbourhood Matching Fund. So where communities are wanting to take action themselves or do something, there's an application process that also lets them quantify their volunteer support as a match funding piece. So it's that additional, the cash element that goes with the community effort. So a really important, different kind of funding. So total has been sitting about 435,000 for certainly the last 3 years. So those are the main grant pools. So just to give you a feel, ooh, that's atrociously hard to see. So that is the grant recipients down the side there. For some of you, you'll know Te Waiaki Puria, people like Graham Dingle Foundation, which supports young people, career navigators, big brothers, big sisters. CAB, clearly you had some submissions through CAB and the supporters during the annual plan process. So apologies, councillors, I hope you'd seen those on your Stella when we went through those. So, and again, apologies for any members of the community who are trying to squint at those, but I think we will post these up on our website at some point. So that's the 210,000 that's distributed there, and obviously the most significant grant there and attracted a lot of attention was the community CAB, so 40 grand for that one. A little more readable, Neighbourhood Matching Fund. So we delayed the initial advertising and marketing this year. You would have seen that during the report back on the performance measures, just so we could get the wording right around your new priorities. So we introduced the safety priority. So you can see there, dominated a lot more from smaller trusts and charities. Parkside appears in there, individual trusts on individual projects, so really important there. And then they've also tagged on the right-hand side, just for your awareness from the staff, an analysis of the number of volunteers that were involved in those smaller neighbourhood matching funds, and almost that volunteer contribution value. So that's that multiplier we get out of the community through our funds being available to that wider group. And a much, much longer list here, which is the community grants across the 3 years. So again, the 105,000, I'm struggling even to read that one this time round. So yeah, a huge number of community groups, organisations that are supported in some way by our funding, not to exclude the fact that they also go to a number of other funders. So for many organisations, they need to do the rounds, they need to talk to Bay Trust, they need to talk to RECT, they need to talk to the Poki Trusts. There is a lot of support that's required to sort of leverage sufficient funding for them to undertake a lot of the good work that these groups do in our community. So just in summary there, in that period, 50 organisations received Neighbourhood Matching Fund, 14 organisations received the partnership agreements across the 3 years, and 44 organisations received community grants across those 3 years. So a lot of community leverage through the investment we make through community grants. So I suppose really there'd been a discussion during the annual plan about the focus and size of the community grants, and really for us, we've got a couple of critical questions for you to discuss, because I think for us it gives us the opportunity, A, to feed a number into the long-term plan process, but if we actually to change the allocation between the different funds or to modify our policy and criteria, it gives us the direction that independent of the funding piece, which is LTP, we can come back with a paper or papers to C&DD committee to adjust our policies to make it clear what the focus of the funds should be and any other change structurally to how they're allocated. So really it was an important, I think, question for us to you as an elected body about, do you want to see any changing in the funding model? And should it clearly, I think this is a no-brainer, it should be aligned to the council priorities, and particularly things like community safety. But again, if there's any other drivers you think are important, and then once you've done that, it gives us the chance to feed back on the relevant policy changes, as I said, but at least we get the placeholder then available for the LTP. So, Your Worship, I'm throwing questions in your direction on this one.
Thank you very much. So this one obviously is a little bit more different. We're not necessarily asking questions of the proposal. The direction that's sought is actually answering these two key questions, so that staff can then bring it back to a relevant committee. So does anybody have any feedback at this stage? If I could just start, I do think it's really important that community safety is a priority in these grants that we're allocating. I also think that it is very timely for a refresh of the funding model, given that, yes, the funding may have been the same in the last 3 years, but actually many of these funding pools have been the same and aligned to the same direction for the past 10 years. Our community is obviously facing some significant challenges, of which one of those has been community safety. So I would love to be able to support a buy local for local approach, where we are enabling and empowering our community organisations who already do so much on a volunteer basis to be supported with funding. That may mean that some people who historically and previously have received funding year on year may no longer fall into those council priorities. But again, given the challenges that our community is facing, it is timely that we also consider the challenge of affordability, and that we can guarantee our community that any ratepayer money that is being spent, even as part of a grant towards others, is delivering outcomes that are beneficial to our community, and will have a clear and visible difference and change to improve the community that we live in. So that's my feedback on number 2, on should it be aligned to the council priorities. Just open up now to the floor for any additional feedback on this item. And just a reminder, we're not making a decision about this yet. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to touch on feedback. I liken some of the grants that we give out, and I'll give an example. I saw one up there for the Filipino Association, $5,000, $6,000. They had their opening, and we talk about let's support things where events can be held here. They came here on Friday. The pōhiri was held there for them, and Mayor Tania was there to welcome them. The ambassador came. People came from all over the country. They pay for the facilities of our energy event centre, and sport is played, culture, food, and they fill our accommodations up. I think those are money sort of fits with our priorities and that too. And so not just the Filipino ones, even sometimes the Chinese, the Indian, various things that happen. we do get value back even more. I do support that.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tautoko, your comments, Councillor Maxwell. I think other priorities that should be included in that line, including the community safety strategy, would be our environment. A lot of these groups are the ones who do the work on the stream sides, who do the work in the parks, who actually contribute to improving food security by growing their own marakai plots. These are all challenges that the community is facing, and they're not going to go away. If anything, they'll get worse as the environment condition changes with climate change, etc. If we can enable those communities to take responsibility for their own backyards, their own parks, their own reserves, their own stream sides, whatever they want to put their hand up for to do the mahi, so long as it meets our priorities, which are the taio of our district, I would support that too. And as far as the community safety side goes, there would be groups who would probably undertake their own SIPTED evaluations and work on those projects themselves. We can only stretch our staff so far to do work, but if our people in our community want to put their hands up and say, hey, we'd like to contribute to this, we understand what you're trying to achieve, we'll help you, we'll do the mahi, you help us with some putia, then I would definitely support that.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just putting this out there for either JP or anyone else around the table. I just wondered, last time when we talked during the annual plan, there were a number of opportunities and discussions talked about, and I wonder if this isn't the time for us to perhaps look at just being a bulk funder for someone else to do the mahi about allocating the actual funds. Yes, I appreciate it would have to be on our priorities, but I just wonder whether that's perhaps something we could look at where we just provide the funds but someone else does the actual hard work and free up some of our team to be perhaps concentrating on more council-aligned issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. And that has actually been a funding model that has been used in the past as well. So we certainly, I can see JP taking notes, and I would support and endorse looking at efficient ways to be able to allocate that funding as well. Any further comments on this? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship. With regards to number one, I'd like to see it stay, the funding to stay, but perhaps look at options that we've just discussed. And I agree, align them more with council priorities, and that way you can be sure that the money is going to the places and the people that will make a difference and align with the council. So yes and yes for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or feedback for JP to take on board? There appear to be none. Sorry, Councillor Wari.
Kia ora tātou. Yeah, no, I'm okay with having a look at how we, not so much allocate, how we distribute as well. But when I look down that list of people who have been successful in getting a grant, organisations that are getting a grant, I think they're all quite worthy and aligned with our kaupapa. So it won't be an easy task, but I think at least we need to really look and figure out how we're going to do that to perhaps be more aligned to our kaupapa. But at the same time, who some, as you've mentioned, te Marukura, some really depend on some of our funding that we give out, like CAB and others. Then you get some random ones like the Awhi Mai Stroke Trust, who's all about well-being and community patrol and all those kind of things that are all, worthy kaupapa. So, in saying that, I'm all right with the directive to seek a better way, or to have a look at for a better way to distribute the funding and align it, I suppose, more so with our kaupapa, our priorities. That's okay with me, but still me whakaaro me aroha anō hoki. So that's all I'll say. Kia ora.
Thank you. I think that feedback has given some clear direction. Just checking if there was any alternative views that anyone wished to discuss on this. If anyone feels differently to the direction given? Nope. Okay, so we'll leave that with JP, and just a reminder that they'll take the feedback on board, and that will come to Community and District Development Committee, I believe. So we welcome Rob to discuss a very exciting proposal. No, yeah. This is Aquatic Centre Stage 3.
Tēnā koutou. Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to go through this, and also thanks for putting the proposal up to be assessed. It's something that's been quite a long time in the running, and for those of you that know the Aquatic Centre, we are making our way through improvements there, and this gives you an opportunity to perhaps get a bit more clarity in a dozen slides or so about what's happening. So just to remind everybody, the Aquatic Centre, prior to the refurbishment that's going on at the moment, so the Aquatic Centre, the main pool hall is closed at the moment because we're going through the stage 2 piece of work, but it was getting approximately 320,000 visits a year, some years even earlier, still up to around 350,000 visits. So to give you some context, the Te Aka Māori gets around 270,000 visits a year, and as we talked at a previous council meeting, the forest gets, from our counters, somewhere around 900 or just under 1 million visits a year. So
recording in progress.
It's a significantly used community facility. In terms of what we provide, it's a building that gets a massive amount of use in it. The majority of users are in there for recreation and leisure, competitive training, fitness and education, and then there's a slight health and therapy component. We are the spa city of New Zealand, so we have health and therapy components in a lot of other facilities that are around the town, but the Aquatic Centre still has some of those that are partaken in by a proportion of our community. And you'll see actually bottom right of that image, 99 people a day were recorded going through the spas, which is around 10% of the people that were in there. 45% of the people who visit the Aquatic Centre generally under the age of 18, and around the 10% mark over the age of 55. Oh, next slide. What's happening there, Rob? Sorry. So what are we already doing? So stage 1 improvements, which was the 50-metre pool, that was completed in 2020-21 at a cost of just over $3 million. So the pool was lengthened to incorporate a bulkhead and was deepened, brand new filtration and treatment plant, and relined, and a significantly improved 50-metre pool, which is the only heated outdoor 50-metre pool in New Zealand, and attracts not only a lot of local users but significant training camps and other areas, from other places come to Rotorua to swim in that 50-metre pool all year round. Stage 2, which is the main pool hall that you will see there, that's currently got a roof off, and basically there's a major refurbishment of that building happening. The overall project cost is around $23.4 million is the budget for that project, which includes construction, a whole lot of other matters that we've talked about, filtration and treatment, all the work, the consulting, the engineers and everything that's gone with it. That's received $6 million of external funding. The outdoor pool received $1.3 million worth of external funding, and that stage 2 is near completion. We're expecting that to be completed in late March, April of 2024. Stage 3 is what we were going to do with that middle area between the two pools. And in terms of understanding what we should be aiming for in stage 3, we went through a bit of a better business case with users and the operators several years ago. And we know that once we've finished with our stage 1 and stage 2 work, we're still going to be lacking a number of fun features. And actually some of the features that were there that were very aged are not going to be replaced with what we've done with the stage 2 piece of work. So some of the splash pad and the spas will also not going to be there after we finished our stage 2 work. We don't have a dedicated learn to swim pool. Now that causes some issues because the learn to swim facility that happens in the leisure pool at the moment is not the ideal place for teaching young children how to swim. There's a lot of distractions in there, and we also get contamination issues which shut down the pool from other users. So there's always been a desire to actually have a dedicated learn to swim facility, which is a common feature in more modern builds in terms of being able to strongly encourage your local community and provide the facilities they need to learn to swim, and also it provides a revenue stream for the pool operators. The better learn to swim facility you have, the better revenue stream they can make off that. The current pool has relatively limited flexibility. Those of you who've been down there at 4 o'clock on a summer afternoon and seen all the manus going on while the aqua joggers are trying to work in the deep part of the pool, will understand that the situation's not ideal, and if we had more established and better facilities for a diversity of users, we'd be able to cater for a larger group of users. And that final point, the generating facility revenue, there are limited revenue opportunities at the moment. Basically admissions is the key way in, learn to swim, and there were other facilities that are included like gyms, historically the spa pools, aqua jogging and things like that. But the more diverse the facilities, the more opportunities there are for catering for specific user groups, creating additional revenue which can potentially de-burden the ratepayer of their contribution towards running the facility. In terms of the stage 3 options that we've had a look at, again, as part of that better business case work, basically a number of objectives about reinstating the full range of offerings, adding additional fun play-based activities, increasing the flexibility, and then providing services for all the key sort of user groups, which is that recreation and leisure, the competitive training, fitness, and the aquatic education. So those are all factors that these previous 2 slides are the factors that we've taken into to understand and work with the community and the operators on what is the ideal stage 3 situation. So we've got them there. Unfortunately, that image is not so good. It's better than JP's, but you'll see at the top there that we've got the dedicated learn to swim pool. We've got spas, we've got aqua play, outdoor family pool, bombing, diving, and hydro slides. And a little more detail on that. So the stage 3 detail that we've developed with our designers, and again, this has been through a process to understand community needs and also working with our current operators. The first one there was a dedicated learn to swim pool. That's isolated on its own. It has its own filtration and treatment system. It has its own changing rooms, own access, and things like that. It can be operated quite independently from the rest of the pools. It could also be designed to have hydrotherapy functions as well. There's quite a lot of those that are being built at the moment that have a deeper area on one side, which can provide hydrotherapy benefits. The other area in the top part of the stage 3, or the northern area, was some spas, 2 outdoor spas for health, wellbeing and therapy, one fitting 6 to 8, one to 10 to 12, and with accessibility ramps as well. The rest of the areas that come through in the stage 3, the area item marked C would be an aqua play facility. I've got a slide coming up of what that sort of might look like, but you'll remember the one we had, which I think was a few buckets that tipped water on your head. Wasn't much more than that. Good fun, but I think it was about 20 years old by the time, and you pushed the button on Shrek's nose or whatever to get things working. The modern facilities of those are pretty impressive now. Outdoor leisure pool, which again is something, especially if we're going into the bombing and slide sort of area, gives parents a place to actually be part of the family activation while they're doing those sorts of things, accessible with ramped access. A bombing pool, which is something that came through in the consultation. There's not too many of these in New Zealand. There's some in South Auckland, but again, nothing particularly dedicated. And of course, hydroslides, which came through very strongly in the public consultation on desires for our Rotorua Aquatic Centre. That's a fairly modern facility now for the aquaplay type of thing, you know, slides, running water, basically a good area targeted for sort of under 12-year-olds, somewhere where parents can feel confident that the kids are having fun in a low depth environment. And then the other one is actually a hydroslide sort of detail. This is actually being provided by a hydroslide manufacturer as an example of what could be done in Rotorua. So this is the sort of facility that we have been doing some further work on. The tower, effectively, in a Rotorua situation, we would have that perspexed in, you know, so it still was able to breathe, but has a wind barrier and a rain barrier on it, but not being the complications of being fully built in, which requires a significant amount of air handling and, you know, a very expensive ancillary facilities if you're going to build something like that inside. So what might these cost? Now, we have been doing work with Veros on business case proposals. For these various components, you will see that the consultant costs, the QS work to provide these at today's rates, you're looking at approximately $9 million for a new building that is set up specifically for Learn to Swim as has been designed. Spa pools, aquaplay, family leisure pool, bombing pool, probably all around $1 million for each of those sorts of facilities. Hydroslides, that setup that that previous image showed with some perspex covering and some waterproofing stuff is looking in the $7 million sort of mark. And we would need some filtration and treatment plant for some of these facilities as well. Actually getting them in there, getting them all set up, we're probably looking at another $1.5 million for that. So the total price that has been estimated, if we were to go ahead and deliver all of stage 3, would be in the order of $21.7 million. Now, what we have done, though, is, again, working with our users and our operators, had a look at some of these and how could they be prioritised or phased to meet the objectives and the needs of our community. Also, from an operator perspective, what might provide an additional revenue stream which might then, like I said earlier, de-risk some of the general ratepayer contribution towards this. If we consider spa pools and aquaplay, approximately $1.8 million for those two facilities, we have, as part of our Better Off funding application that happened to support stage 2, we have residual funding that was obtained from that Better Off application process to go towards stage 3 of the Rotorua Aquatic Centre. That was, it was specifically identified for the Rotorua Aquatic Centre stage 3. We could provide the spa pools and the aquaplay using just that external Better Off funding. Hydroslides. Now, that is a facility that across a number of places in New Zealand, the pool operators, the council and the hydroslide providers have entered into joint ventures to provide that facility and distribute the revenue that comes from that facility across the partners. We know with CLM, who are our current operators, and Whitewater, who is a company that they work with in a number of other pools that they run on behalf of councils, that CLM and Whitewater and council could enter into a joint venture to provide a hydroslide opportunity at the Rotorua Aquatic Centre. When it comes to the other components that we could put in there, we would need to do some plant work for a hydroslide. We would need to put in some plant to go with it, to support it. And then the other features, family leisure pool, bombing pool, learn to swim. At the moment, we don't have any funding partners identified for those. That's not to say that they aren't out there, and we know for something like a learn to swim pool, there is a significant interest from community funding groups to provide that sort of, or to contribute or invest in that sort of facility to lift learn to swim in cities across the country. So I've drawn a red line there across the spa pools and the aquaplay, because that's for what we consider the first easy segment that could come off the ranks, and basically that would use our better off funding that we already have applied for and obtained for stage 3 work. Dropping that line down a level brings in hydroslides, and we know that we have external funding for that as well. Not to cover off the full amount, but there is a reasonable investment that has been suggested from partners in terms of being able to support hydroslides. That would, generate a revenue for all parties. It would also require a commitment for us to stay with the operators that would be making that investment to operate the facility. We've certainly got no reason to think that the operators working in our facility aren't doing an excellent job. They've certainly been doing I would have to admit, a better job than when council was running it. And then, of course, we've got everything under the red line as to what might happen there. So, looking at a sequence of options, the current state is stage 2 underway and due to be completed April 24. Stage 3 was signalled in the earlier LTP with very limited RLC investment. Okay. We could take the first option, which would be use the better off funding to deliver the spas and aquaplay. Cost to the ratepayer would be nil, and that external funding would be used in the first 1 to 2 years of the LTP to be able to provide those additional fund facility components for the facility. The option 2 there is actually the spas, the aquaplay, and put in the hydroslides with some plant. The estimate on that is to cost 9.7 million, of which 5.7 would be needed from RLC. The rest, $4 million, we would obtain from external funding, which would be a combination of the better off funding and money coming in from the joint venture. The third option, which is basically a staged sequencing of the whole lot, would be to do the option 2, so put the 5.7 million of council commitment into it to ensure that we get the hydroslides. But then, further out in the long-term plan, and this may be similar to the discussion that we had before about some of the inner city situation, is further out in the long-term plan, put a higher level of funding in and work on using council seed funding to obtain external funding. We won't be able to obtain 90% external funding because the external funders require council or council to put a commitment to it. So what we've basically suggested is that for us to secure potentially 10 million of external funding, we would need to be matching that plus the additional funding that we had earlier. So that's the suggested options that we have there. I'm happy to take any questions on those and the facility. And back through you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for providing the detail of the various options. Are there any questions? Councillor Waru?
Kia ora te manukura. Kia ora, Rob. Thank you for your report. I'm a lot clearer now on what money is being spent on, well, proposed to be spent on. I think as a city that's surrounded by water, lakes, rivers, everything, I think it'd be pretty, well, this is my own opinion, irresponsible of us not to have some kind of facility where kids can learn to swim. Because not like we're not in not meant to go to the Wahau and in the lakes anymore unless you're living right there. So I would support, actually, to be quite frank, the whole lot getting done. As I think it's going to be a good asset for the community. They've been waiting a while for things. I mean, that feedback you got was from a while back, and we're only just getting to complete stage 2. So that's great. I've looked at the figures there that you've given around, what would add to the rates in terms of, 0.39% or 0.8%. And I think it's quite a reasonable thing given the number of people who use the facility already, and it's not even in full flight. I just think it'll be a good outcome for the community. So based on that, at the manukura, I'm going to support the full Monty, if I could use a better phrase. So, koira, kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Councillor Waru. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rob, you've focused on the cost of these things, but what's the business case, if there is one, for the whole facility in terms of revenue, additional revenue generation, or additional costs? What would that look like afterwards? And I think that is something that I would like to see before I committed to a large capital spend.
Yes, thank you. There is actually work going on the whole business case at the moment. We've engaged Veros to develop this business case, which would look into this, consider the revenue streams from those. What are the best operating models? Because with council investing, it needs to get a return on its investment. So what are the best operating models for some of these additional extra components and the revenue that they bring in? And also, we've talked earlier about potential admission and pricing models, what is suitable for our community, and what's the added extra patronage that some of these things would be in. So that's all happening at the moment. We haven't got that yet, but I would expect that we should have that in the next couple of months.
Just one more comment, if I may. I would put the bombing pool well ahead of aquaplay and spas. Just saying. Manus.
I just want to, as a question, Rob, is there a reason why the spas and aquaplay have been identified in the better off funding, or is there the potential for this new council to reprioritise what's important for us to see delivered in the next 1 to 2 years?
It was prioritised through basically user feedback, in that the aquaplay in particular definitely covers off that under 12 sort of group, and while we had a very old one there, it's our new version is very desired. The spas also has been identified by a user group as a therapy improvement, and again it actually produces quite a reason. It produces a better than expected revenue for the operators, which helps offset other costs to council. So the spas were ones that we didn't actually think were quite as high on the list, but but they do produce a revenue return that offsets the subsidy that council has to contribute.
Thank you. And just confirming, when we talk about aquaplay, is that the image that you showed before the hydro slide?
That's correct. It's the slide, it's the slides and the tipping water and all that sort of stuff. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, just based on that comment that you made about additional revenue to the operators, that would become part of the business plan, and would they make a contribution to this?
Yes. Basically, we pay a subsidy to the operators to make up the operational cost of running the pool under their model. The subsidy we pay them is about a sixth of what the ratepayer used to pay when the council operated the pool. So they are doing a significantly more efficient job of running the pool than when it was being run by council. If they are able to make additional revenue, then that subsidy that the council provides can be decreased. And we're in the process of, we've gone through the first 5 years with these operators. We're redoing the pool now, and moving forward from here, we need to renegotiate that agreement we have, and with a new pool and potentially more things coming online, it gives us the opportunity to reset the parameters around that, which the business case or the business modelling that you talked about will help us reset those.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your report, Rob. Just going back in my memory, I recall you did a presentation to us regarding the extra plant work that we needed for the existing pool structure because it wasn't up to spec, and that money was going to come from the Better Off Fund. Is that correct?
The intention was to actually use our overall contingency as the first call on that, which we are confident we will be able to do.
So the Better Off Fund here for the first two parts, the aquaplay and for the spas, that won't be potentially jeopardised by if the plant cost overrun?
We have high confidence that won't be jeopardised.
Okay, fantastic. And then going forward, just carrying on from what Councillor Brown was talking about, with all of this expansive modernisation, etc., we will be more competitive in that space in the market compared to what Taupo offers, what Tauranga offers. So could we expect that not only looking after our local community, we would see an increase through the doors in revenue by visitors coming to town to try out our facility as well?
Yes, we would. We would expect that, it's a geothermally heated pool. It certainly provides some winter attraction, and we would expect that it's going to attract people and also give them an added attraction when they're coming to Rotorua to visit.
Excellent. So when the business case is done, will that be done in time for building into our LTP consultation document to say we have estimated that this is going to happen if we do this, and therefore the funding required will be Y, whatever?
Yes, my understanding that case will be in time for us to include in that consultation process.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Rob, for your presentation. Could I just ask, and sorry, I appreciate it's a smaller item out of the list here, but is there a shortage of spas in this town that I'm unaware of? I'm just concerned that here we are investing in something where other people are also investing, and I just sort of wonder where this should sit on our priority list. Thank you.
No, there isn't a shortage of spas in this town. I would say there is a good surplus of spas in this town. We have a user group that uses the aquatic centre that identified that spas were an important service that they were able to obtain, especially when they were in there in conjunction with things like aqua jogging and visiting with small children and things like that. So our users have identified that spas are important to them, And that's why I suppose the spa options that have been presented there are not exorbitant. It's a relatively low-key provision, but it meets a gap that the users have identified.
Thank you. So do we run a risk though of offsetting, say, like the poly pools or something like that? If there's a significant cost saving, why would people go to other options as opposed to just going to the aquatic centre? Thank you.
I think the other options are significantly different to what the aquatic centre would offer. You know, I think there's enough market separation there, and the aquatic centre has always had, you know, indoor and outdoor spas that certainly wouldn't compare with what the commercial sector does provide.
Thank you. I do also want to note that that may have been a really fancy way of saying this is a very affordable option as well for our families too. And I do want to note I was quite pleased to see the spa had one pool designed with accessible entry ramp as well. It was very good. Thank you. Councillor Wang?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to touch on that as well. So it's really great to see the accessible design and accessibility, not just with that, but even right now with the current pool, with the wheelchair lift, that's there as well. I guess fully support Councillor Waru's comments as well. I think as a district with so many lakes, and especially over the summer, we have so many people going to enjoy the lakes. It's always really disheartening when we see the drowning statistics, and every time we see articles on drowning, and especially not just children but adults as well. And so for me, the learn to swim pools would be absolutely vital to this project. And then adding on to that, as we heard from the previous consultation around this project, the hydrosides clearly had a huge interest from the community. And I remember being part of that consultation process, and the number of people that said that they, currently travel to Tauranga, to Taupo, and then even when they visit other cities and their facilities, to enjoy their facilities. And they've always wished that we had something like that here in Rotorua. And so I'm really glad to hear that the potential, that potential increase in numbers coming back once it's all reopened, that the extra revenue could potentially decrease council's contribution to the operation of the aquatic centre. But I would like Councillor Waru signal that the third option 2 plus the bonding pool, family pool and learn to swim pools would be my preferred option to go out to consultation with.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question was also too just around the options that have been put up, and if there was actually another way of doing that. So the consultation that you've done, what you were talking about, was really just the current users rather than the community as a whole as to what their preference would be? Is that what you were signaling as to how you end up with that priority list with the learn to swim at the bottom of the pile?
It was with the users through the last. It was with the users in preparation for what was going to be in stage 3. There was also consultation in the last long-term plan, and there was significant support for stage 3 in the last long-term plan, and my recollection of feedback was overwhelmingly towards hydroslides and things like that. The situation with learn to swim, I think this is probably just worth considering. There is learn to swim ability at the pool now. So, the operators currently operate the biggest learn to swim school in their 23 pools that they operate. So the Rotorua facility does provide learn to swim capability. However, they see a lot more potential
we would, it wouldn't put us in the bracket of being a hydrocide city of any note, if we did go ahead with hydrosides. Rob, this better off funding. This is the Three Waters lolly scramble sweetener kind of money, isn't it? That's what the better off funding is.
It was offered up by yes, Department of Internal Affairs as part of that program.
Yeah. So couldn't that money be directed at, say, the Tarawera reticulation scheme? Wouldn't that be a more appropriate use of Three Waters infrastructure?
From my understanding, the Better Off funding was provided specifically for the aquatic centre. Our expectation would be is if that we asked to re-divert that to something completely unrelated, that they would request it back. I can't confirm that, but certainly in the application process it had to be very specific, and it was targeted towards things like community improvements rather than infrastructure as such, rather than general infrastructure. You know, what can we do that encourages community well-being?
Okay. In light of the new government, is this funding already confirmed? Is the new government, they're not keen to proceed with Three Waters, I understand. Is this funding still secure?
When the new government is formed, noting that we don't have ministers in place yet, I'm sure we will have a bit more clarity. There is a real difficulty at the moment that councils are grappling with, in that we've had an indication of policy from the parties that we expect to form a government, but the law remains and the regulations remain the same, and until they change, we're required to follow the existing policy and regulation. So in terms of the Better Off funding, I think there is some potential policy risk. We won't know the detail of that until probably early next year. So for the time being, what you can say is that option one assumes external funding. So we would have to find the external funding if it's not from Better Off funding. Or you could choose to put council funding in it. You don't need to make that decision today. At this stage, all we're doing is we're modelling it for your decision making in for the consultation document. And that will go out to the community. You will then get feedback from the community. By that stage, you will have clarity on what the new government's intentions are, and you can make your decisions at that time, early next year. But for the time being, what we need is direction from you on what you want modelled.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Maxwell and then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you. That's been a good debate. Good call it on. Thanks, Rob, for a bit more information to bring us up to date. Fortunately, I've been through the consultation of the last LTP, and you're right, they came back strongly in support of option 3. If I recall, there was good help. So I took and support what Councillor Wadu said an hour ago, and also Councillor Wang. So I'm supportive of that, and also, fortunately, I've got a good memory. I remember the land was gifted by Puketa Orua Whata some time ago, and so we made a lot of saving a long time ago, but up to now, the main thing for me that holds me still, I think, to go out with a good, strong preference for me, option 3, I think the council will, and wait to hear from the people. If they come back strongly again like they did before, that gives us a good indication. And also, when now Mayor Tania goes over to Beppu, she's going to get a wealthy sponsor, and he'll also contribute to our sparsity here. Thank you.
I think we'll take on board any wealthy sponsors that wish to help us to achieve this for our community. We have Councillor O'Brien, and then I'd like to wrap this up, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, this is a fantastic facility and I think we all want to see it. My only concern is I look at the debt, 5.7 onto the CapEx. I find it somewhat ironic that we're talking about tourism and blah, blah, blah on this admittedly great facility, but we bulked at $10 million for our city focus, which would produce jobs, new growth, restaurants, the whole shebang down the track. For me, I'd prefer the minimum. I'm just concerned that at the amount of money that we're spending on this one facility, when we have so many other very pressing issues, I'd prefer a little bit of caution on that myself. So I'd be supporting the minimum option, although again, as Councillor Kaifong said, the combination perhaps wouldn't quite match with my own priorities. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'm too very aware of the debt and is it a want or a need? Because that's what's going to come down to that in the end when we're making some more decisions further down the line. So I just want to throw that out there. I wonder if we could investigate that question that Councillor Lee asked. I just wonder whether understanding that fund better, because that's a substantial amount of money that could actually perhaps go to somewhere that is under some pressure. I just would be interested to know the details of that fund, if that's okay. Thank you.
We can certainly bring back some more information and just get a signal, Rob or Una. Will we? Oh, sorry, JP can answer now.
Through you, Your Worship, just picking up on that, we had to, there was a tight time frame, we actually had to apply to that fund. So we had the project approved and through that assessment. So it was an approved project to go into the aquatic centre. And there was a number of criteria, and it was things like community benefit, but also build ready. So they were trying to see projects and funding that was immediately utilised. Hence, we've just carried ours through a project that was existing. So I think that was at the time why it couldn't be considered for Tarawera. So we actually have an approved funding agreement with them. So I think that was the other discussion there is there is almost a contracted funding agreement. So if they breach it, they're breaching it. So at the moment it's a committed fund to us.
I just want to be clear because there's some information that looks like it says it can be substituted, but it has to be, like you say, under agreement with the CIP fund or the government. So I just was wanting to clarify, that's all.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I think elected members have had some good discussion and there's been a lot of further information that has been provided. I do want to note as well that whatever option we go with, there will be more information provided through the consultation document as well. And also just a reminder that yes, this is one of the more big ticket items for our community, but before we confirm the consultation document, we will also, so I'll take the big step. Once we finish all of the proposals today, staff will then be able to model those into what that will look like in terms of a capital works program, as well as what the rating impact will be, and then that will return to us before the consultation document is finalised. So there will be one final step where we can look at it and go, actually, that rates increase is too much, or whether we wish to change some of the options at that time. Just to provide reassurance, this process right now allows our staff to be guided on what should go through into the further modelling to produce the consultation document. Councillor Waddy, you had a question?
Just a comment, spending money. We're not spending any money right now. What we're doing is putting it out there to in proposal form to see if the community are on board with the spend or not. And then we'll, obviously, if they are, then kapai. If they are not, then we got to make some decisions around how we can still make some contribution or some impact to those projects that have been put forward to us. So just a little reminder. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, thank you. Just one final question, Rob, because I am very supportive of investigating hydroslates, although I too also have some concern about going for the full Monty option, which of course could be quite expensive once we accumulate all of the various proposals on top of our infrastructure requirements. So is the estimated timeframe for that to all begin within that 1 to 3 year timeframe, or would there be the possibility of undertaking the minimum, that middle one, minimum recommended as spas, aquaplay, hydroslides and some plant, but also acknowledging that within the next 10 years, if it becomes possible, we would like to explore to the later end of those 10 years, the remaining bombing pool, family pool and learn to swim pools.
Yes, certainly. We would probably struggle to deliver everything in 3 years. So, I know that the external investment around the slides are keen to go. So we would want to do that earlier in the piece. But again, we haven't found the external funding for the additional items. So we would need to search for that, which would be further out.
Thank you very much. Councillor Waddy, you had another point you wish to raise?
Yeah, just to sort of, in my experience, we talk about pools and this particular subject, it ends up being quite a lot more costly if you do it sort of too spread out, because all the things, everyone's there at the time, and you save in ways that you wouldn't be able to save if you did it one pool and then another pool. It's actually makes more economic sense, even though it's a lot more expensive. Makes more economic sense to do it like that. Just wanted to put that out there.
So on that point, Rob, quick question. If there was a delay, so say we were to go for everything but then push it out, will creating any of those of the final option mean that the whole facility will need to be closed, or are they able to be constructed on a staged process without impacting the completed facilities?
They would all be able to be done, let's say, with minimal disruption to the existing facilities once we finish stage 1 and stage 2. I think, again, it would be part of the construction program to minimise that, possibly some of the plant, but again, having that ready to go could be a day for switching over or something like that. So I think it would be very minimal.
Thank you. We have had support for both the middle option and the final, let's go option 1, 2, 3 like that, option 2 and option 3. Just my personal views on it, given of course the affordability of the community and that we haven't looked at external investment yet for the others, I personally would support the minimum recommended, which is the spas, aquaplay, hydroslides and sun plant. I think it would be incredibly exciting to be able to deliver that for the community and for our families who have been asking for this for a very long time. But I am also mindful we have a lot of families that once we add all of this up, I am quite concerned on the rates increase. So what I'll do is we'll just do the show of hands for option 1, option 2, option 3, just in that order, and then we'll see what one has the majority support to progress. Bearing in mind that's only to progress towards consultation, and once it comes back to us, we may have changing, or we very likely have changing views, and we can finalise it then. So I'll start with option 1, use better off funding to deliver spas and aquaplay, which will have no impact to the ratepayers. Show of hands, anyone who supports that. Nope. Option 2, minimum recommended is spas, aquaplay, hydroslides and some plant. Cost to ratepayers 16 per annum.
Sorry, I got mixed up there. Could you say that again?
Oh, no problem. I'm just taking it because there's been a few different options supported. I'm taking it from the top, 1, 2, and then 3. So there wasn't majority support for 1. So option 2, and sorry, let me 2, and option 3. Okay, well that is. What was your one?
Option 2 and option 3.
Yeah, option 2 and option 3 are 4 each. So if any councillors who haven't decided on what option they prefer could have a quick think about it, and we'll do that again. Oh, Councillor Kiriopa, sorry, did you 2. Thank you. Was that including her? Yeah, so that is 5 for option 2. Okay. Okay. 2? Yes, so option 2 is progressing forward to the next round. Remember again, this will come back after some financial modelling and we may change our minds. However, this gives our staff direction that they can continue progressing the option 2 proposal, which is the minimum. Yes, I'll read it out. Minimum recommended is spas, aquaplay, hydroslides and some plant. Cost is 9.7 million with 5.7 million from council and 4 million external funding anticipated. That is a $16 per annum cost to ratepayer and around about a 0.39% rates increase. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob. I hope that gives you guys plenty of guidance. Next slide. What happens next? It's a very good question. Do we want to know? No.
So we've just included in the, and you should have this information already, but just wanted to make sure that we remind ourselves that there is still a number of workshops to be had. So there is the Capital Works Program and Financial Strategy, which will carry over to the 5th of December from the 21st of November. Who has the clicker? Thank you. 13 December is the council decision where you will approve the final draft of the LTP model in preparation for the consultation questions. January, we will be finalising the documentation on the basis of your 13 December decision and engaging with the auditor. February, auditor's review of the CD, which is linked to the draft LTP. March is the decision to adopt the consultation document, and April is community consultation.
Thank you. I'll just check if there's anything Una wishes to add to this. No, good. Okay. Question from Councillor Brown.
Where does the Lakes and Rural Board feedback fit into this, please? And Te Tato? No, Te Tato didn't. No.
So we have been doing some work on reviewing the requests from the 2 community boards and Te Tato to identify what's already within existing work programs. So a number of the requests are BAU and what requires a council decision. I have just today sort of reviewed where that's landing. I need to discuss with the Mayor how we bring that forward for direction setting from the elected members. But so we've been going through a process of doing internal work on that.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that. Sorry, that was a point that I needed to cover off today as well, just to reassure councillors that is being taken on board. The staff do just need a little bit more time to bring that on board. But if you note on here, the 21st of November workshop where we will discuss the Capital Works Program, many of the items that were raised, such as community halls as an example, could potentially come into here. And I believe Gina mentioned also previously some of the requests that came through from Te Tato Charu also could be dealt with here too. So without further ado, that is us. Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just looking at the Capital Works Program on the 21st of this 21st of next month. It says there, Tarawera, Rotorua, wastewater treatment plants, stormwater, roading, etc. So, etc. Does that include, for example, the rest of our sports field network plans, etc.? Because, you know, the next 3 years, we're not just doing Te Toki Place and 25 grand per year for 2 years to investigate indoor basketball courts. What else is happening? Is there something else happening?
So there's 2 things, and one is that I've asked staff to ensure that when we do the discussion on Capital Works Program, I know that there has been concern around the Westbrook precinct proposal that was in the previous LTP. So that is not part of the LTP modelling that we are doing. So that proposal will not exist once this council adopts its proposal. Instead, what we are doing is the Te Toki Place investment, as well as the review around what is required around the district. So there's quite a different change of philosophy in terms of the provision of sports fields rather than a centralised model. We are looking at what's required across the district. I don't know if JP wants to add anything further to there, but just so there'll be two things. One, we will make it very clear that the Westbrook precinct proposal is not a part of this LTP. It's not a current strategy of the council. And secondly, discussion around the future provision of sports grounds will be covered off in that workshop.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It has been it has been quite a big day, so we will wrap up there. But thank you very much. Thank you once again to staff for bringing through the proposals, for collating and putting down viable proposals based on what councillors have requested. I really look forward to getting into the Capital Works program. Once we have that workshop, I think all of the pieces of the puzzle will fall together, and we'll see how that's placed. And we'll also start to see how much this is going to cost us. So heads up, it will be a difficult discussion. This is a difficult discussion across the country, with all of the councils experiencing some significant rates increases just due to the nature of inflation, and also the many pressures that local government is under. But I feel very confident that we will find our way to produce a very quality consultation document for our community to consider. Thank you very much for your time today. I'd like to ask, yes, well, hopefully. Councillor, would you like to close our hui o te karakia?
Very much so. Kia tau katoa te ata whai o tō tātou wariki au hukaraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhingata hitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmine.
Thank you. Declare this workshop closed.
Hare, ruia, great hui.